You guys able to see my screen?
Yep, we can see it.
Okay. And Brandon, you're great with this tool, I know. So if as I go through this, if you have any things to complement what I'm sharing, please add your expertise on top of it. That'd be awesome. So here's the basic tool. So once you log into it, actually we'll just start from the beginning just so it looks. So generally when you launch it, it's going to go out there and see if there's any new updates. And if it does, you'll get a little pop-up screen that says, hey, there's some new pricing updates. Do you want to update it now? You generally hit the yes button. It'll go up there, do the updates, and then you'll come to this screen. So the basics of the screen on the left are the catalog, and we'll kind of go through that. This is the start page. Now you can open up previous ones if you want to go in there and make changes to it. Most of the time, when I make changes to this, I might get a configuration. I put the configuration together. Maybe I send it to you guys. Maybe you ask for a config, and then you come back and go, hey, the customer wants a 3-year next business day service on there. So I can take your existing one and maybe add the service to it, or maybe it was 1 year and now they want 3-year instead of 1 year. So we can make changes to it. We can make additions to it. So instead of starting all over again, you can open existing ones just like you'd expect. You've got your list of ones that are here. And then the recent files are the kind of the ones down here. If we start off with doing a new system, we can go and create a multi-site deployment. So, for example, this is site number 1, and I can come in here and just for a couple basics, I can add some access points and switches to this particular site. And then I can also come in here and I can create a new site. And so I can come in and here's a brand new site. So I can do a multi-site solution and maybe I add some different switches out here and add some different access points out here. And so there is a topology piece here. And if you do multi-site, this is the way that we normally would do it. And then oftentimes at branch offices, you can have a standardized solution that may get rolled out to more than one site. So let's suggest that this location, this Ethernet switch and this access point is what I'm going to duplicate across multiple sites. I can come in here and I can copy that, and then I can hit paste and change the name from Nebraska to Arizona. And so now I've got Arizona that has the same configuration as my Nebraska site. So if you want to copy and paste, you can do that. Or, sometimes we have big configurations where we can copy and paste. And then when we get into things like the quote, you can get the composites of all the different sites together, or you can get the Arizona only, the Nebraska only, the main site only. And when we export this to Excel, which I'll show you a little bit later, you'll see that they have the different tabs. So the composite tab with all the parts. And then if you created any sites, it would show you the Nebraska site, the Arizona site, or whatever sites that you have associated with it. So that's the basic piece of it from a topology perspective. And then what we generally do is we're going to come over here to the catalog and we're going to select the parts that we want to have. Now, another tool that you guys are going to find quite useful is the next tab over from the catalog. You see this advisors tool. The advisors tool will give me a list of different devices that are out there. So in this case, this is for Aruba wireless. So do I want an access point or controller? I want an access point. Do I want indoor or outdoor? I want indoor ones. What style do I want? Say I want instant on. And if you look down here, you're going to see different, you're going to see the different ones. So these are all the instant on access points that are available. So you can basically come through here. If we don't select instant on, you're also going to see a bunch of the enterprise type access points that are listed in here. And then I can come in here and choose the technology that I want. Let's say I want AX. And then from there, I can see antennas, internal, external. If I want internal antennas, it should show me the 505. And then there's my AP. And then I can add that to the configuration. And so anyways, there's a wireless selector. The one that people use the most is this switch selector. So if you've messed around with Aruba switching products in the past, you probably have seen that there are a number of different switch products. So fixed port is just going to be like a 24 or 48 port type of switch. And then they also have modular chassis. So if I do fixed ports, CX is what we're recommending as we move forward. Do I want layer 2? Do I want layer 3? Let's say I just want layer 2. I can come over to my ports. How many ports do I want? Let's say I just want a 24 port switch. If I just want gig copper, or if I want multi-gig or 10 gig or whatever those things are, this will narrow down the switch selection. And so we have a 6000 with power over Ethernet, a 6100, and a 6100 with power over Ethernet. And if you come down here, you can get the additional features that are associated with it. So if somebody comes to you and they want a particular switch, this is a great way, this little switch selector, to kind of narrow down what those switches are to help you figure out what's the right product line to put them in. Now, another piece that gets used quite a bit here is really the search window. So this is where I can come in and put part numbers. So what is this? R2H292. So if somebody gives you a part number, you can put it in here and it'll show you that it's part of the 500 series. And if you click on this button, it'll show you that it's the 505 access point. And so anyways, we get this quite a bit where somebody might give us a part number for an accessory or a transceiver, and maybe you get it in an email and you're not sure what that is. You could always do a Google search, but if you're looking in the tool, you can always type it in there and validate, what part it is. So let me pause for a quick moment, and I'm gonna check over here and see if you guys have any questions. Let's take a pause for a second. Do you guys have any questions? Let me hit the chat window real quick. All right. So I think we're good at the moment, so I'm gonna keep going if you guys are good. The first one that's at the very top, this new and updated, will show you any new updates that were added recently. So in this case, within Aruba, there were some 12,900 series switch options that were new. There's a new 610 access point. There's a new MSR router. And then within the Ruckus portfolio, there's an IoT subscription part that's new to the solution. Now, the other way that you'll see this is if we went into the Aruba access points as an example, you will see a little new sign over here just to the right of that 610 that just shows you that that's a new product that's been added recently. And then also to the right of this one, this 340, you will see that there's an end of sale piece that's there. Now, if you click on it, you'll get this pop-up window. So when I clicked on that end of sale, it will say, you know, this is the end of sale for the 340 series. And if you were looking at buying one of these 344s as an example, which was that part number, the replacement for the 340 series is the 534. And here's the Aruba part number associated with that. We didn't get into it in our class, but I'll just share this information with you because when you use this tool, you might see the 5 different types of access points that are out there. So in the United States, we use the US one. There's EG for Egypt. There is IL is for Israel, JP is for Japan, and everything else is considered to be rest of the world. And so when we talked about wireless, in the United States, the FCC is in charge of the wireless spectrum, and they have carved out that 2.4, that 5 gig, and the 6 gig spectrum. And so the US access points will be associated with those spectrum. And then if there's any special security or an encryption associated with US ones, that will be a part of it. In a similar fashion, Japan has a different way of doing it. Israel has a different way of doing it. Egypt has a different way of doing it. And then the other ones are considered to be rest of the world. And so for your customers, my assumption is you're going to be buying almost all of them for the United States. But if you do choose a different one, for example, if you have customers in Canada, they would need a rest of the world access point. And we would need to make sure that all the APs, and if there's wireless controllers, any of the wireless controllers in that wireless configuration would all be rest of the world. So you can't take a US controller and connect a rest of the world AP to it or vice versa. They all have to be the same. So if we go to the, in this case, if we go to the access point, I'll move this a little bit here. So if we go to this access point, you will see a drop-down menu that shows rest of the world, United States, Japan, Israel, and Egypt. It defaults for the United States, but you can choose one of the other options and it will change the part number appropriately. So let's stay on the APs because the APs are going to be something you guys are going to deal with. So let's take an AP22 because that's a really common access point that's out there. So Instant On is its own tab. Under Instant On, I've got the access points and the switches. So if you click on the access points, you can see the different APs. And then down here, I've got a couple of different things, right? So once again, I could choose my region. United States is the default, which we almost always choose. And then I've got 2 options. So the regular Instant On that you see here would be the one that you would use if you were going to power it with the power over Ethernet switch type solution. And then we have this bundle, and the bundle is the access point plus a power adapter. So think of this as like a power brick, and you're going to power the access point using the power brick instead of PoE. And so with the AP, if you see I choose if I choose the bundle, then I don't get any other options. But if I choose the AP only, I now have a choice. Do I want to add the power brick Do I want to add a PoE injector, or do I plan on powering it through a PoE switch? Now, the other thing that happens when I go to the APs is I have these tabs. So the next tab is mounting kits. Now, all the instant on APs come with the mounting kits. But there's also a flesh mount sleeve that's a nice cosmetic looking sleeve that you can add to it. The attributes are really good if you're doing any of the engineering pieces, because it will tell you things like height and weight and power. So if you have to do a power over Ethernet budget, so let's say you have a solution where they have one 48-port switch and they're going to be powering 30 access points, you're going to need to know how much power over Ethernet is required to power those 30 APs. In this case, the APs are going to require 10.1 watts per AP. You multiply that by your 30, and you got about 31 watts of power, or excuse me, about 300 and what is it, 300, just over 300 watts or so of power that would be required for that. Right, so if I needed 300 watts of power and I went to my switches, you can see that we sell the switches. If you look at my mouse, you can see we have an 8-port switch with 124 watts. We have a 24-port switch with 195, and then we have a 48 and 24-port switch with 370. So the PoE capabilities of switches, for power and access points, are often contributed to the amount of wattage that's necessary for that. And then the last tab is this messages. And so it'll give you any additional recommendations. There's not much in instant on, but when we get in the other ones, I'll show you that a little bit better. And then the second piece on this is, let's say for this configuration, you need, let's say you needed 21 of these. You can do this quantity multiplier and change it to 21. And now on your configuration, you're going to see that the access point has 21 of the APs in there. So I don't have to copy and paste 21 or add 21 to it. I can just change my quantity multiplier to 21 and use that as a configuration for it. So if we go to, say, the instant on switches as an example, we started the 1930s, which are probably the most common switch that you guys are going to sell at the moment. They do make non-PoE versions, so an 8-port, 24, 48-port without power over Ethernet. And then they make these 4 at the bottom that have power over Ethernet. Once again, the 8-port, 224 ports based on the wattage, 195 watts versus 370, and then our 48-port switch there. These units do have SFP uplinks, right? So this is where I would put in my transceivers. So the transceivers are what slide into the switch that enable us to put in the, the fiber connections that are often run between wiring closets. In this particular case, I have a 10 gig uplink, a SFP plus interface, and then I have 10 gig transceiver options. I also have 1 gig transceiver options. So this one is MMF, which is multi-mode fiber. And then I also have SMF for single mode fiber. And then when I get down here, Cat5 is going to give me additional 100 gig or 100 meg, I'm sorry, gigabit connections for Cat5, and then multi-mode and single mode associated with it. Now, instant on transceivers are dramatically less expensive than the regular ones that get used on switches, or are enterprise switches, but both of them work. So this transceiver for $1,100 is the same transceiver for $99 that's part of the Instant On portfolio. Both of them are multi-mode fiber. They support the SR standard and can run 300 meters over multi-mode fiber. So if you're doing Instant On, make sure you get the Instant On transceivers because they are dramatically less expensive. So another thing from a tab perspective is power cord. The default is that you get a United States power cord, but you can choose a power cord for different countries. And there's also a PDU power cord. So instead of having your 3-prong outlet to plug into the wall, if you're going to plug it into a PDU type device, you can order it with the PDU. But most of us, most of the time, the switches you're going to order are going to have a pound ABA at the end, and the pound ABA just is a representation, with the ABA being that it's a North American power cord, your regular 110 type power cord. So on this 1930 switch, I also have an accessories tab. So once again, there are enterprise part numbers that will work on these switches, and there are Instant On part numbers that will work on these switches. And if you have the Instant On part numbers, please use those because they will be less expensive and do the same thing. So these are direct attach cables. So this is what would plug into that SFP port and give you the 10 gig connection, maybe between switches, or switch the server, switch the storage, or whatever you want to connect to. So instead of buying a transceiver in the server and a transceiver on the switch and then getting a fiber patch cable, you can buy one of these direct attach cables that has what looks like a transceiver on each end and connect it that way and use those ports to get your 10 gig interface. But the distance is much shorter. So you're looking at 1 meters or 3 meters. So 1 meters is 3.28 feet. 3 meters is about a 10-foot cable. From the switches, once again, you get your attributes. This is where I can come in here and change it from 1 to however many I need. You once again get dimensions, power consumption, those type of things that are part of it. And then if there's any additional messages that you may need, that's part of it. So that's how we add an Ethernet switch to the solution. So let me pause for a quick second because I just did the Instant On APs and the Instant On switches. I'm going to go look at the chat window, see if you guys have any questions. If you have any questions, go ahead and come off mute, and this would be a good time to ask any questions about the Instant On products. Okay, looks like you guys are good.
Hey, Jeff.
Yeah.
One thing I wanted to note, I wasn't sure if you're going to hit on, but one thing I like to do when I utilize Iris is I rearrange the tabs. So that's one thing you guys can do if, depending on how your monitors are, these little panels you can drag and drop and shift. So like me personally, when I use it, I take the bottom panel and I make it so that way it's in the middle between the two panels, so that way you get a full view of them.
Yeah, so what Brandon's saying is, like what we see down here in the bottom, we can move these around and, you know, change the way that we do this, depending upon how you like to do it. And so anyways, you can change this around. I'm going to reset the window layout and just to kind of put it back to the default. But what he's suggesting is you can definitely change that around to the way that you prefer to see it. And if it does go out of kilter, you can do what I just did, which is reset the window layout, and it'll put it back into this mode, which will enable you to kind of start from here and then, you know, once again, take it and move it whatever way that you prefer.
And then are you going to get to the viewer panel?
Let little bit later if we have some time.
Perfect. That's one of my biggest things. I've screenshotted and sent, if somebody wants to take a more in-depth look. So.
Yeah. So let's come back into here and we'll grab some traditional enterprise type access points. The 505 is the most common one that we sell. So I'm going to bring one of those in, and then I'm going to just grab a common enterprise switch. So let's do like a 6200F. That's a common one. So if I come to my access point, the enterprise one, once again, you can choose the region that you want. There is a 505, a 505 TAA. So if you've done business with the government before, specifically the federal government, you might see stuff where they wanted FIPS/TAA compliant. And so there are some additional requirements to meet that. One of the requirements is it has to be assembled in the United States and some other different things. So for our federal government, they want access points that are TAA compliant. And so this is where we would choose that particular TAA compliant AP if needed. The 505 has the internal antennas. The 504s have the external antennas. So if I select the 504, just as an example, you will see this external antenna tab pop up, and then it will give me a selection of antennas that work with this access point. And it will add, you click on the one that you want, and it'll add that to the quote. The enterprise access points do require a mount. Instant On does not. The enterprise do. The most common one that we have is this one on the top, which is called the Mount A. The Mount A is what goes to a standard 9/16 ceiling mounted rail. We also have, there are some 15/16 rails that are out there. There are, the Mount C is for the new silhouettes type of rails that are out there for ceilings. And then we have a solid surface mount and a wall box. And so these are mounts that we have. Like I said, most of the time we're going to choose this mount. So for this 504, I also have some additional accessories. So I have console cables. I can put in an LTE modem if I want a USB LTE modem. There are some related products. So if I want to add an Aruba Central cloud license, I can click on my green button, and it now has added that tab where I can add cloud licenses. And we'll get to cloud licenses after this. So those are related products that are out there. Services. So there are some Aruba services where they do wireless implementations, training classes, pro services, those type of things. You can add those. Here's my attributes around the APs. So in this case, maybe I want a dozen of these access points. Once again, I can see the wattage. So the 504s in this case use 16.5 watts. Here's the height and weight and those type of things around it. And then from a wireless perspective, it is, a ceiling mounted AP at the 5 gigahertz. It can go 20 megahertz channels and 14 dB of signal, that type of stuff. So if you need some of those things, and then of course, if there's any messages around it, there's part of that. So you can kind of go, my recommendation for you for starting this is kind of just go tab by tab, see if any of these things are things that you need to know about. And then I'm going to show you another piece of this that's going to be important after I do the switches. So if I get to a switch, once again, I've got some non-PoE modules at the top, 24 and 48 ports. And then I've got PoE switches. In this particular case, I have a 24-port PoE switch with 370 watts of PoE power, a 48-port switch with 370 watts of PoE power, and I also have a 48-port switch that has 740 watts of PoE power. So I've got 3 different options there. And then the switches will come with the standard ears to mount it into a standard 19-inch rack, a traditional two-post rack. If you are mounting it into a 4-post rack, like you see in a lot of data centers, and you want that kit, there is an optional 4-post rack mount kit. So you just click on that button. This is your transceiver selection. Once again, my 10 gig options, my 1 gig options. These do have TAA capable transceivers. So once again, these are made in the United States and meet that TAA certification. So if you are choosing a switch that's going to the government, you're going to want to choose the TAA transceiver option on that. Once again, your related products for the switch, stuff like Aruba Central, services associated with it, power cords, just like we had on Instant On, right? My pound ABA for US. This is going to give me my other countries. Accessories. So there's my rack mount kit if I want to do it over here. Here's my direct attach cables. Here's my console cables if I want to use those. Information about my switch and where I can change the quantity. Maybe I want 3 of these units. Power consumption, height, weight, attributes, and any special messages if needed. Now, we shared with you that if you purchase the Instant On portfolio, you get the free cloud management. If you get the enterprise products, you add Aruba Central, which is the cloud management platform for the enterprise access points and switches. The subscriptions for these are going to be 1 year, 3 year, 5 year, 7 year, 10 year. And you basically have to buy a license for every device that you want to cloud manage. So in our solution, we have 12 access points. So I'm going to put in 12 here. And the switches, the licenses are sold based on the series. So if you see here, this is a 6200 series switch. So when I add the cloud license, I need to come to this one, which is for 6200 series switches. And in this case, I have 3 of them. Now, the one other piece that's going to come around that you guys are going to want to do is under design, you can add on parts and services. So for the access point and the switches, the default is to add a 1 year next business day exchange service. You can easily change this to a 3 year, 5 year type of solution if you wanted to. If they're interested in on the switches, if they want 24/7 with a technician coming out on site, there are some services there. And so this is where we would select the various service offerings, the foundation care type of services that would complement what the customer has from what they want from a hardware perspective. Now in the blue, this will tell me that this particular switch has a limited lifetime warranty. It has next business day ship is the warranty default. Business hour tech support, right? And this access point has a lifetime warranty. The SLA for hardware replacement is 10-day turnaround. I get tech support for 90 days. And so this will share with me what the base warranty is to help me make a better educated decision on the type of maintenance service that I might want to add to this solution. So let me pause for a moment. So we've done an access point and a switch on the enterprise side, added some cloud license. So let me see if there's any questions. So does the tool offer wrong configuration issue messages? It doesn't offer any of those messages. So the assumption is, well, first of all, it only lets you select the right products that go along with this particular item. So if you look at the transceivers, these are the transceivers that work with that particular switch. So it does not allow you to select, say, an instant on transceiver for an enterprise access point. For this AP that has antennas, it will only show you the external antennas or the external mounting kits that will work with that access point only. And so as an example, there are outdoor access points, and outdoor access points have a totally different set of mounting kits for them compared to the indoor access points. And we choose, oops. And the antennas for the outdoor access points are different than the internal access points, the inside-outside access points. So my point I'm trying to share with you is when you select these, you're only going to get the options for the accessories that are associated with that item. And so you can, you're only going to be able to select those. Same with the warranty. So if I look at the warranty stuff now, with these additional ones, I'm going to see a different SKUs, and these part numbers for the indoor APs are going to be different than the outdoor APs, just as an example. So there's not really a way to add the wrong service to the part, add the wrong transceiver to the part. You have to select, which transceiver that you want, but it's not going to enable you to choose a transceiver that's not supported within the product. Let me pause for a second. Alex, did that answer your question, or does anybody else have any questions?
Yeah, it did, but if you go back to the other tab, it had like error messages on the access point piece of it. See there, right there. What does that mean?
So it's saying that that you need the power. You need a PoE switch with 16.5 watts to power is what it's giving you as a message.
Okay.
Now, one of the things, and I don't think I'm going to have time to do it, to really go over it, but there is a connector tool. So if I take this connector tool and I say, I'm going to connect these access points to this switch. I'm going to connect port number 1 on the AP to say this connection. So now I can do this where I connect and if you look now, that one message that I had before where it said, hey, you don't have the right amount of power, that message goes away because the PoE switch is now providing the power necessary to power that access point. Now, this is a good tool in addition to creating this bill of materials. It's a good tool also if you think about creating a network diagram, and this will export to Visio. So you can use this export, and you can export it to Visio. So if you do this, it'll pop it up, and then you can pop it up in Visio, and you can add other things to it if you'd like to. So I'm going to take off these other APs that I was just using for the example. So right now we've got 3 switches, a dozen APs, and some cloud licenses. So if I wanted to, I'm going to come in here and I'm going to hit Save As. I give it a name. And then what I want to do is I want to create a quote. So I hit the quote button. The screen pops up and says, all right, here's the items that are in the quote. And then what I do is I export this to Excel. Now it will take the same name that I saved it within Iris. In this case, I called the configuration Iris training, but you can change it to something different if you'd like to. And now you've got a spreadsheet that has the BOM that's for the configuration that we just had. Now I'd like to do this. You can do whatever you want to. I like to cut this column, paste the column over here. I get rid of the pricing if needed. So if I'm just trying to go in and create a quote and I want to make it as easy as possible, I'll do something like this. And now it gives me my configuration. So here's my 12 access points. Here's the maintenance, the 1-year next business day exchange for those APs. Here's the mounts for those APs. So there's 12 APs. So what it did is it gave me a 10-pack and then 2 individual mounts, because that's the least expensive way of doing it. We added those antennas to them. So there's 2 antennas per AP. So I got 24 antennas. I've got 3 switches. The pound ABA means that it comes with the North American power cord. This is the 3-year service for that switch, the next business day service. I added that 4-post rack mount kit to it. And then I've got Aruba Central licenses for access points. I got a dozen of those. And I got 3 Aruba Central license for the Ethernet switches. And so if you guys send me a configuration or something, a lot of times you'll see in my email that I'll take something that looks like this and I'll reply it back to the sales team, and the sales team can then take this bill of materials and they can easily create a Ingram quote now that they have the quantity and part numbers for all the pieces that are part of that solution. Does that make sense? Okay. So I made a little file save. We'll save that for later. And then once again, you know, I can hit my file close. I can create a new system if I want to, or hit file close. If I want to open up the last one I just did, like the Iris training piece here. If you guys come back to me and say, hey, we had the 1-year service before and I want the 3-year, I can just easily change this from 1-year to 3-year. Come in here, hit file quote, export it to Excel. Might put 3-year. Now I'm going to have the same bill of material, but my maintenance is now going to be 3 years as opposed to the 1-year maintenance. Right, so I can easily make those changes as the customer makes changes of what they would prefer. There is a piece on here to manage spare parts. I almost never use this, but I have had some customers where instead of buying maintenance, they will just do a sparing strategy. And so we will just add a number of spares associated with it. So I've done this with school districts. a lot of school districts, they will have techs that drive around in vans and go from one school to another school to do troubleshooting and repair. And so a lot of schools, instead of buying a maintenance contract for every switch and access point, they will just have a few spares, and the tech will throw a spare in the van and go out to the location and replace it if needed, and then do a warranty exchange for the other device, and then use that replacement one that comes in the mail or gets delivered as the spare as they move forward. What are a couple of the other things? You can change your window view. So if you don't want summary and a bunch of other stuff, you can change that. If you wanted to do exchange rates, you could add that. There are subscriptions, so I've only shown you the Aruba stuff. However, there is APC for power. There is Cisco. There's Citrix, Extreme, Fortinet, Point Next, any of the HP rack and power solutions, any of the storage networking, like the top of rack switches that you would use for the server storage solution. Those devices are in here. And then Ruckus Networks. Now the Iris tool itself will show you the retail cost. These are all retail pricing, right? So this is not what you guys buy it from Ingram. This is not what you sell it to your customer at. This is just retail pricing only. Some of these ones, for example, if you want to do, say you wanted to do this Cisco switch, you're going to see that it doesn't populate the pricing unless you go through the process of, so there's a subscription thing where you have to come in here and whoops, hit the wrong button. Anyways, you're going to have to go in here for a couple of these ones if you use them and kind of put in your partner login for it to add the pricing to these particular solutions. Okay. You don't have to do it with the Aruba stuff, but if you do some of the other ones, you may have to add that, and that's part of that subscription piece. There are different views, so if you want to see this is what a wireless view would look like. You want to see port view. I don't really use these views. Sometimes I see like the rack view. So if you had a solution where you had a 19-inch rack and you wanted to see all those, I normally just use the standard switch view from a block perspective. You can also do the power piece. So this is showing you right now, 16.5 watts to that AP, and the switch is using 76 watts at the moment. So about 16 watts is going to that AP, and about another 60 watts is going to be used to run the motherboard, if you will. But anyways, you can change the views if you want to. There is a draw tool, so if you want to make the pictures ones in which you want to, just like a Visio type diagram where you want to include certain products and make it look nicer so that when you export it, you can do that. You can add the text box and come in here and say, data center switches or data center So anyways, you can add text to it if you want to make this nicer so that when you export it, it has that information in there.
Can you show the chassis view?
The chassis.
Yeah.
So if we get into switches, say we did a chassis like the 6400.
Sorry, not the chassis themselves, but the chassis view. So like click on the 6200. There we go. Right, there we go.
Yeah, so if you hit the chassis view, it'll actually show you the front and the back of the unit. Like in this case, if I hit this one, it'll show the rear and it'll show me the fans and the power supplies. And so so I showed you earlier just how to do like these 48 port switches, but if you did a chassis solution, you would come down here and say, I want the 5-slot chassis or I want the 10-slot chassis. And then you would go through that process. So I go left to right. It comes with one management module, which you see here in the picture. If you want redundant management, you add a second one into it. Now I've got these 5 slots that I can put in different modules. So this is a 12-port 100 gig module. This is a 24-port SFP module to do 10 gig fiber on. This is a PoE module. So I can come in here and select the different modules that are going to go into this particular chassis. It's got 2 fan trays. Right now it's got an 1800 watt power supply. I can change it to 3000 and I can choose how many I want. In this case, I have 4. I can select 2 if I want to. This is but basically where I would choose my power capabilities. Any accessories, maybe I want that 4-post rack mount kit for it. I want some direct attach cables. So that's where you get that chassis view that Brandon was describing. So we have about 2 minutes left. So let me pause for a second because I kind of gave you the base overview of it. What kind of questions do you guys have?
There's no way to incorporate real-time availability into the tool, right?
No, there's not. No, this is really a tool that somebody like I would use to create that bill of materials, and then we would have to take a look at the Ingram inventory as an example to see today exactly what we have available, because the Ingram inventory is going to change on a daily basis.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
And Jeff, on adding catalogs, like when I downloaded mine, I didn't have half the catalogs in there, so you have to request that, correct?
So Dave, can I ask you to repeat that because it kind of faded out? It might have been my network connection. I apologize.
Yeah, when I downloaded the software, I only have access to certain catalogs. I don't have any HP catalog at all, so it looks like I have to request that.
Okay.
Just confirming if that's correct or not.
So on the catalog itself, you don't have any Aruba stuff at all?
Nope, none.
Okay. Yeah, you would have to ask. You'd have to request it, I guess, is the way that you'd have to get it.
Okay, yeah, that's what I did. It says it looks like you just request them being added to your account, I think is what it is. So
okay.
Yeah.
Okay. There is some generic stuff down here. So if you wanted to, add a generic patch panel or a rack, you can add these things. So if you want to, anyways, you can add some additional things to the design if you want to do it. So I know we're kind of at the top of the hour, so I'm gonna pause for a moment. Brandon or Mike, if you guys have anything else to to maybe add before we wrap this up? I'll maybe give you a moment to make a comment. If not, we'll kind of wrap it up.
I don't have anything, Jeff. No, thanks.
Okay. Thanks, Mike.
Thank you.
Hey,
Take
thanks for your
care.
time,
Bye.
Jeff.